Hey guys, welcome back to the vlog. I'm excited to have you here. Today we are going to talk about adoption again. November is National Adoption Awareness Month, and so we are going to be putting out a lot of content regarding adoption. So if adoption is something that you've been thinking about or is on your heart, stick around and hopefully we can push you into saying yes. We know that our perspective, our ways of going through an adoption may not be the same for every family. Everyone's journey is going to look completely different. So we thought that we would ask a few of our friends, other adoptive families, to be a part of this video. And we're just going to ask them some questions. And that way you can get a different perspective on how families pursue adoption, what brought them into adoption, and how they handle their fears and obstacles that may arise whenever you're looking at the adoption process, because it's very overwhelming.
Hi, we're the Abels family. I'm Jennifer.
I'm Brandon.
Hey, we're the Hayes family.
Hi, my name is Bryn Monroe. My husband is Greg Monroe.
Hey, we are the Lamberts, Will and Christy Lambert.
As many of you know, we're the Phelps family.
My name is Ashley.
And I'm Stan.
Brandon had always wanted to adopt. For me, I was very hesitant, but just felt that call of God saying to be obedient. I think that's the main thing, was to follow in obedience and do what He.
I think one reason we chose to adopt is a bit in big part because we've seen the impact that it's had in several orphans' lives, but specifically Michaela and Isabella, who probably you all are very familiar with and know all about. And we've just watched that story unfold. The impact that's had on not only the children's lives, Mika and Isabella, but especially and even so on the lives of Ashley and Stan and their children, and just watching them grow through this process and seeing how it's changed their lives, their perspectives, and
The blessing.
Well, in the fall of 2016, we were going through this kind of personal revival in our spiritual lives, and God was showing us a lot of different things. And I think He just began to put it on our hearts through the scriptures, through different books we were reading, and we really saw the need more than ever. So it was interesting, as we've always been, we've always loved kids. We've always loved to be around kids and play with kids and things like that. But it never really became a possibility for us, imminently anyway, until we really began to get God's heart for the orphan. And so, just that process of personal revival really led us to the idea of adoption.
The reason that my husband and I chose to adopt is actually something that had been on our hearts for years. We knew that is how God was calling us to start our family. There's not any medical reason why we couldn't have biological children, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. We just felt really, really pulled to start and grow our family through adoption.
Something that we had always talked about, but we never felt like the timing was right. I don't know if the timing will ever be right, but I feel like it's something God led us to, and we're so glad we did.
Yeah, and I think part of it, like he said, we talked about it off and on for years, and then we really started studying some different things at our church. And I think part of reading books like Radical and other books really just kind of touched our heart and really had us start looking at our own lives in ways that we could live more for Jesus. And so, it was like you said, it was always there. And so making that decision was easier at that time.
So initially, while we were dating, Ashley and I had talked about adoption. After 4 biological kids, we kind of put it on the back burner, decided it was probably for somebody else. And then God actually called us to adopt and showed us that we had a little girl who was Michaela in the Philippines. So that's really how God pulled us into adoption. And then after we got into it, we began to see the need and the crisis that was going on in the world. And from that point, we realized it's not, does God want us to adopt? It's, are we able? and if we're able, why not?
That was a big thing for us, and I remember when we decided to adopt, we called Stan and Ashlyn, and I remember Stan saying, just God will provide, and he has provided. We have we posted out on social media, and I would say probably over half of our fundraising has come from just donations, people giving money towards the adoption.
Yeah.
We did do a t-shirt fundraiser and a puzzle fundraiser.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're selling some custom signs that we're actually making to help with the end-up costs. We've had some very significant large donations that have really come out of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, I think, this is something that I've seen throughout my life. I remember early childhood, going through financial hardships with just my family and thinking, man, how are we ever going to get through this? And God always provided. And that was no different in this case here. When we said yes, we want to do this.
Open.
God, it was amazing that every step of the way there were financial obligations that had to be met. We had to have a certain amount of money to give to get for the home study, a certain amount for the adoption agency's fees, and every step of the way I was thinking, man, that's another $3,000 that we don't have. How are we gonna get this? And God, amazingly, God provided each and every time. We never had a moment in this process where we said, we can't take this next step because we're waiting on money.
So the finances were probably the biggest fear and the biggest unknown when we were starting the process, and we didn't have $30,000 or $40,000 just laying around, and we really didn't have any clue where that would come from. But we just decided to step out in faith, trusting that God would provide along the way, and He did, and He actually provided every single penny so that we were able to complete our adoption debt-free. Praise the Lord. He's so faithful and good. And so that came through a lot of different means. We did some fundraising. We did a garage sale. We did a t-shirt fundraiser. We did a puzzle fundraiser. Yeah, just little fundraisers here and there. And then we applied for several grants, which we actually received every single grant we applied for. We ended up with 4. Through all of those things coming together, we were able to complete the adoption.
We may not have all the answers, we may not have all the money, but this is where God is leading us, so we're just going to dive in and work hard to do whatever we can to raise money. We applied for grants, we did some fundraisers, anything that we could just to help meet each of those sets of fees as they came along. It sounds really overwhelming and daunting to see that an adoption internationally typically costs between $30,000 and $40,000. You think, oh my gosh, how in the world could we come up with that right now? But the truth is, you don't need it all right away. You don't need it at day one. Everything is spaced out months and months, giving you time to come up with the funds, to do fundraisers, to apply for grants. There's so many options out there, and it's amazing to see how people, even total strangers, were willing to donate to the cause, to help support us, and it all worked out seamlessly, and we were just so thankful for the way God provided for us to fund our adoption.
What I'll say is, I think that if you're willing, God will kind of find a way. And I know He did with us. We had help from family, friends, the church. It was pretty incredible, the amount of people that kind of reached out.
Yeah, we had even anonymous people that we would get checks or money from in the mail, or a friend of a friend would send money, but it wasn't somebody we even know. And really, our family stepped up big, and our church family stepped up in a huge way. And it was taken care of. So don't let money be the thing that holds you back from choosing to adopt.
So I distinctly remember Stan and I sitting on the couch trying to figure out how are we going to fund this adoption. And I just remember, and I think you were reading a blog too on the internet, was that none of this is about us. It's not about what money we have or what money we do not have. This is, number one, about obeying what God has already called us to do. But number two, it's about allowing the Lord to step in and provide in ways that we couldn't imagine that He would provide for.
The vast majority of people that look into adoption who then decide not to actually say that finances is the number one reason. Let me just tell you, we didn't have the money to adopt either. I think very few people have $30,000 to $40,000 laying around the house. But we just knew that if God's truly called us to do this, He's going to provide.
For me, I just like, how can I choose just one child when there are so many that need to be taken care of and have a family? And I remember talking with Ashley specifically about this, and she said, this really helped me. Think of where your family is, what you do day to day, and what would fit best for your family. So we were looking through the list, and this one little girl, her name was Wei Wei. She just really jumped out. Her little ears kind of stuck out, kind of like mine do. I've got long hair to cover that up. This little girl, Wei Wei, had some serious heart defects, and so that kind of brought me into her. Her name just kept coming back up. We were praying about it, just kept coming back up, and that's how we chose Wei Wei.
Well, initially we thought that we were going to adopt a child really young because our agency told us we need to keep birth order, which is really important for most adoptions. But they also sent us a list of waiting children every month, and we were to basically look through those children. But most of them had significant special needs or were older, and we just saw Melanie, our daughter, on there one day, and I think I had seen her first, and it's funny because you have a picture of what you think your child's going to be like, and then when you actually do see your child, all the things that you thought were, the thing you thought your child was going to be, or how old they were going to be, or what kind of things you thought you could accept or deal with as a person, kind of melted off, and you just really felt this peace. And Melanie certainly did not fit the description of what we were kind of thought was the wisest course for us at first. She was born without hands and feet and born without a mouth opening, and she was an older child. She was 10 at the time we adopted her. So it certainly threw us for a loop, but at the same time, when it's right, God will he'll build the story around that.
There were a few files that we did review of two different little girls, and we prayed and we just wrestled with that decision, because it wasn't an instant, this is her, we know it's her, we need to say yes right now and move forward. There was a lot that had to go into these decisions because their needs were very severe. We ended up not saying yes to those two little girls. We kept up with the agency to see that they did find their families, and they did. Both girls did find their families. We, out of the blue, got the phone call from our agency saying we have the file of the little girl. She's 2 years old. She had heart surgery, and the rest was history. As soon as we saw her file, we saw her pictures, we were like, there she is. That's our girl.
Every month we would get a list of children, and we would look through that list and talk about them if there was anybody we saw. Well, I saw 3 kids and just fell in love. Of course, I brought them to him. His reaction wasn't initially the same.
My reaction was 3. And I think that's probably would be a lot of people's reaction but again, I think that God has a plan, and we don't always know His plan, but if we have faith and step out in faith, amazing things, and we're just so glad that we did.
And they have blessed our lives tremendously.
In our first adoption process, I remember just being so hypersensitive to all the decisions that had to be made. And I just felt like we were going to make the wrong decision, that we were going to choose the wrong child, we were going to choose the wrong agency, we were going to choose the wrong fundraiser. And so I know for us, we just had to put it back on the Lord to say, okay, we've said yes. We've said yes to this calling that we truly know nothing about, and it's your job to show us where and when and how to do all of this. And that includes choosing which child we are going to request to bring into our family. Now, a few years later, 2 adoption processes later, we realize that whenever your heart is there seeking the Lord and choosing to bring in one of His children into your home and loving them as your own, you're not going to choose the wrong child.
He's going to direct your paths. You don't have to worry about choosing the wrong child. You're not going to. The child that God brings to you is the child that's supposed to be in your family. I
I can't answer that yet. I pray and I hope and I believe it will very firmly. I've seen it happen all, in pretty much every adoption case or every person who I've seen adopt before. So,
and we're not naive. We know that bonding and attachment is a serious issue, and
especially with an older child.
We have an older child, so we hope to build that trust and that safety feel for her, so that she will bond and attach. We hope and pray that will happen.
Whatever age you adopt them at, adoption comes from loss. We always talk about that. So whether it's just never knowing their biological mom and dad, or knowing, like our daughter did, actually knowing them for a while but never having a great relationship with them, there's going to be nuances in that relationship that you have to work out. You're working out of a deficit already, no matter where you adopt that child at. So yes, of course, there's going to be some differences there, but you should expect and hope for the same level of intimacy and the same level of love, certainly, that you have with your biological children. But it also won't look exactly the same every single time. I think that's a very safe estimate to make.
So while I can't attest to what it's like to having a biological child, I do think 100% that the love is the same. It doesn't matter whether you start and grow your family through one way or another. That love is there, that love is strong, and that love is real.
Yes, you can have that deep bond. You have to learn their personality traits, their characteristics. You have to learn how to parent that child based on trauma sometimes, but that doesn't mean you can't have a deep bond and end up with those same meaningful relationships where you're able to joke with them, laugh, love on them. So yeah, that bond can absolutely become a deep, meaningful bond, whether it's a biological or adopted child.
If there's one piece of advice that I could give to you on this topic, would be to go into it with no expectations. I know many families go into it thinking, oh, I'm going to love them and they're going to love me, and we're giving them such a better life now, and how could they not love this, and how could they not love their new brothers and sisters? And at the end of the day, these kids come from so much trauma, neglect, such a past that some of us have never walked through, and that is greatly going to affect what your bonding and attachment is going to look like. But you absolutely can love just as much.
I think it's been positive in this regard so far. We've been able to video chat and we chat with Jency Weiwei several times now, probably a dozen
Very blessed.
times. Very thankful that we've been able to do that. So we're connecting with her. The kids are always there and present and excited to talk to her and see her, and they've just grown to
Look forward
to that time. Yeah, we all do each and every
I know that one time the boys were not available, and Weiwei was like, where are the brothers? The Gugu.
Yeah.
Brothers, where are they?
Yeah.
And so...
And the last video chat, she said the same thing for sister. Where's sister?
Where's sister? So
she's looking forward
to it as we are, and our children are as well.
I think the biggest fear is that, my biological children may think that I don't love them as much anymore because we went and adopted a child. And in reality, what I found, at least with our situation, is that our kids, when a new child, whether it's biological or adopted, get entered into the family, they have to make room in their lives and their hearts. If we'd only had one child and it was an only child, they tend to have this "the world revolves around me" personality. And kids, I remember one time Jude asked me, he said, do you love Melanie more than me, when she first came home, because she was getting a lot of attention. And it was a great opportunity for me to explain to him that the kind of love that God has for us and the kind of love that we try to have for them, it does not divide by how many people are in it. The way I love him well is when I love others well. And the way that I love Melanie well is when I love him well. And it actually multiplies. It doesn't divide like the world's love. Right. So when we actually introduce a adoptive child into our home, it's an opportunity to show our biological kids that love actually multiplies exponentially. Right. When we do it in God's name and in God's way. So it actually can have the opposite effect of, the enemy tries to tempt us to fear that, but in reality, I found this complete opposite. It actually helps the kids understand that the world needs our love and the world needs God's love.
Our son didn't have younger siblings because he was the youngest, and he adores them. He plays with the kids, entertains them. I can't imagine not seeing him have those interactions. And I think our oldest daughter, she just has grown spiritually through it. She was a great help in those early days when we brought them home. And, for her, it's really touched her heart, the ministry side of it. I know she has said the message she would want people to know is don't assume somebody else is going to adopt. You may be the one that needs to adopt for that child to have a family. And so we watch them interact now, and our 5 children are siblings through and through. They annoy each other. They love each other. They play together and, again, mess with each other, play jokes on each other. So it's just been a beautiful relationship to see that form.
I think this is something that surprises most people when they bring kids home through adoption, is the great impact it can have on your biological children. Our kids have changed so much and developed a godly love that they did not have before.
And they wouldn't have that had they not experienced adoption.
And they learn, the world's not about them.
Yeah.
That God's created them for a purpose. And I can tell you right now, our biological kids see a greater purpose even in their, child and teen lives than I ever did as a child. I mean, our kids understand we're here for a reason. God has us working in these kids' lives for a reason.
And that is just follow the Lord's calling, pray, seek His guidance, and if you feel that Holy Spirit,
pit in your stomach,
yeah,
the Holy Spirit, that's the Holy Spirit.
And it won't leave you alone. And I know this is the case for us. Then
we just
do
have to
something
submit.
about it.
If He's calling you to do that, and you know it, and you feel it in the pit of your stomach, and that's the Holy Spirit calling you, definitely walk boldly in your faith and go for it.
That's it.
In terms of the actual process before you get your child, it's a long process. It requires a lot of waiting, which is really hard, and a lot of things feel kind of completely out of your control. So I would say just take it one day at a time, kind of like you said before, like one step at a time, one day at a time.
I remember my grandmother, she's with the Lord now, but when she was alive, when I was a kid, I'd always drive around with her, and she'd always sing this hymn. I guess it was an old hymn, "One Day at a Time, Sweet Jesus." And I've always kind of held on to that. I remember at her funeral we talked about that. But the point is, it's true, when we start worrying about tomorrow, worrying about how this is going to affect us 5 years from now or 10 years from now, what we're doing is we're dealing with tomorrow's problems with today's grace, and that's, you can't do that. So I would just advise people, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time,
If that feeling is in your heart, if you're even considering it a little bit, there's a reason that feeling is on your heart. And I would just say, just dive in, just jump in with both feet and trust that God is going to work amazing things through it all, because He absolutely has and continues to do so.
So one of the other things is maybe to consider that adoption is just something that we're all supposed to do before we know if it's a no. I think that's one of the things that we've talked about is pretty clear what the Bible says for us to do and how we're supposed to act. And I think we look at it wrong sometimes. I think we look at it as, should we adopt? I think, yes, we should adopt. The question is, should we not adopt? And maybe every family isn't ready for it or built for it, or God has that in their plans. But I just think that it's needed, it's biblical, and that every kid needs a home.
Too many people want to have all the answers. They want to have everything set out before them and have all the answers before they step out in faith. And if you had all the answers, it wouldn't be faith. God calls us to take care of orphans. And, for example, when the Good Samaritan was walking by the traveler who had been beaten up and robbed, he didn't wait and say, God, do I help this man? He knew there was a need and he filled it. And I think that's the same thing we as Christians have to do as believers, is we see the need, we have to determine, can we meet that need, and then we meet it. I'll tell you something else, and I've learned this the older I've gotten. If you're following Christ and you're not led to be uncomfortable, you're probably not obeying Him, because God continually calls us to places that stretch us and builds our faith, and that doesn't happen when we're in comfort. And I'll tell you, I've never been so uncomfortable in my life where we are right now, but I've also never been as joyful and happy as I am right now, because while it may be uncomfortable, while it may stretch you, knowing that you're walking in God's will for your life and that you're making a difference changes everything.
Are you being intentional in how you're leading your life? Are you seeking ways to serve Christ, or are you more about seeking ways that Christ can serve you?
So this is a call to action. I mean, you have to say to yourself, are we able? And if you are able, what are you waiting for? Just say yes. These kids aren't just numbers. These kids have names. They're known by God. And I wonder sometimes if God's looking at the church and wondering, how are you letting them suffer, yet you're called by my name.
Say yes. So that is essentially what we are trying to do here on this YouTube channel. Encourage other families to say yes. So thank y'all for watching. I hope that this video offered you some great insight and wisdom, encouragement, all the things, so that you can too say yes to maybe bringing home an orphan into your family. We appreciate y'all being here, and we'll see y'all next time. Bye.